Welcome back. We have a special edition of Splat Picks this week. I'm James,
I'm Drew, and we got
and
special guest Mr. Jeff Brantley. How about you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, let's see, boys. I am currently a broadcaster for the Cincinnati Reds. I didn't really start my career in baseball that way. I began as a high school baseball player in Hoover, Alabama. I got a scholarship to play baseball at Mississippi State. Played there for 4 years. I'm still the single season record holder for wins in a season and wins career and innings pitched in the SEC. Drafted in 1985 by the San Francisco Giants. Played in that organization for 9 years, 6.5 of which were in the big leagues. Then I played for the Reds after that. I was an all-star and played in the World Series with the Giants. Played in the World Series my rookie year. How about that? That's kind of nerve-wracking.
Nice.
Played with like I said, the Cincinnati Reds, won the Rolaids Relief Award in 1996, led all of Major League Baseball in saves that year. After that, pitched for the Cardinals, pitched for the Phillies, and my last year was the Texas Rangers. After my last year with the Rangers, ESPN called, asked me if I would be willing or interested in doing some games, and I'm sure we'll get into this, but I've always wanted to be a broadcaster. I wanted to be a broadcaster before I wanted to be a player, so I've gotten to pretty much live two dreams. And went to work at ESPN, worked there for 6 years. The current owner of the Cincinnati Reds, Bob Castellini, bought the Reds, and I ended up going back to the Reds, and I've been there for the last 18 years now.
Cool.
awesome. I was doing a little reading before we recorded today. I saw somewhere that you were actually a Reds fan before you had joined the organization. Sorry about that. Can you tell us a little about how you got into baseball as a kid?
Yeah, I think my greatest enjoyment was listening to the voices of the game. I can remember, you guys are probably too young to remember this, but there was a show called This Week in Baseball, and it was hosted by Mel Allen. And I can remember just being enamored by the way that he carried his voice and kind of talked through the program. And it wasn't, for me, it wasn't really about the highlights or what was actually going on in baseball. It was about listening to his voice. Keith Jackson was another favorite of mine. I grew up listening to Marty Brenneman, who later became one of my partners in the radio booth with the Cincinnati Reds, and Joe Nuxall. I listened to both of those guys when I was growing up in Birmingham, Alabama. I wasn't a Braves fan or a Cardinals fan, Drew. I
Now, go
was a, I
Cardinals.
was I was a Reds fan, and I grew up listening to Reds. And it's kind of funny because I didn't tell you guys this story, but when when the Reds came on the radio, it was a Spanish station, 700 in Birmingham or in Hoover, Alabama. 700, which is the big station in Cincinnati, that was a Spanish station all day. It was a Cuban station. But right at 6 o'clock in Alabama, which is 7 o'clock in Cincinnati, because Cincinnati's on East Coast time, the Reds would break in on that station. Yeah, you had to listen to it in the car. We didn't have the technology that we have today. You had to be in the car and you had to kind of be moving back and forth in the driveway in order to keep the signal. A lot of your older listeners will understand what I'm talking about. You guys probably have no idea what that means, but that's how we kept the signal, and we would just kind of slide back and forth in the driveway and be able to listen to the Reds on the radio.
How cool.
Talking about how the game's changed, how has it changed since you played to today? I know it's a whole different game than back when you were a pitcher, and it's still fun to watch, but I want to know your perspective as an announcer, but also as a player.
I think in one of the things that I remember a lot about playing in the big leagues, there guys were not real happy with striking out. They would do anything they could to be able to make contact. And I think in today's game, you see a lot of guys with instead of having a two-stroke approach where they choke up and try to hit the ball the other way or put the ball in play, they're still down on the knob of the bat and they're swinging from their heels to try to hit the ball out of the ballpark. And I think that's one of I mean, home runs have always been the sexy thing in baseball. That's always been the big draw to come to the ballpark, and it's what people talk about every single night. And it was that way when I played, just as it is today. But there were not nearly as many home runs in the game back in those days as there is now. Now there's a lot of difference. The bats are different now. The baseball bats, they're harder, they're more consistent, they don't break as much, and the balls are different. Sometimes you get the impression that these guys are hitting a golf ball the way that they hit it out of the ballpark.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And speaking about some players that are hitting it out of the park, who are some guys that we should look out for in this upcoming season to maybe have a breakout year or help their team make a push in the playoffs? Who are some of those guys that you're looking at that we should know?
Well, I think you have to look at some competitive clubs. Number one, the Baltimore Orioles have a young kid that they drafted in 2022 by the name of Jackson Holliday. I don't know that he's going to start the year in the big leagues, but I think he has a pretty good shot at getting to the big leagues. Now, James, you mentioned this the other night. They already have a shortstop by the name of Gunnar Henderson that one run. I mean, he's a pretty good rookie in his own right. I mean, he's a young player. So they have two guys just in Jackson Holliday and Gunnar Henderson that will play up the middle. Who moves to second? Maybe that's Gunnar Henderson. Maybe it's Jackson Holliday. But the one thing that we know for sure, they can both flat hit, as can a lot of those guys, those young players on the Orioles. Another guy I look at is Jackson Churio. He signed an $80+ million contract during the offseason. He's never played a day in the big leagues. So that should tell you a little bit of the expectations of the Milwaukee Brewers. He will probably start the season in the big leagues. He'll probably play center field. And the guy can flat play. He can do it all. He can throw, he can run, he can hit, and he can hit the ball with some power. I think those are two guys that you should definitely look for if you're not looking at the Reds. But the Reds also have two players that were consensus number one prospects in baseball. One of them being their shortstop, Ellie De La Cruz, about as exciting as a player as you could ask for. I mean, he's a 6'5" shortstop, and that's kind of unheard of in today's game. I mean, you'd have to go all the way back to the likes of Cal Ripken Jr. to talk about a guy that was as big as De La Cruz playing shortstop and have the kind of hype that is surrounding him at this point in time. And we also have another kid coming that is presently one of the top prospects in baseball. If he's not number one, he's number two, and that's Noelvi Marte. Marte plays third, De La Cruz plays shortstop, and the Reds have a lot of young players, and they really burst onto the scene last year.
Oh yeah. With the Reds heating up, like that whole NL Central, the Cardinals, they had a bad season last year, but the Brewers have been good. The Cubs are heating up too. So that's going to be a good division to watch. And since you're a part of that, how do you think that's going to play out this year?
Drew, I think it's heavy competition in the Central, and I think it's always that way. Now, the Cardinals ended up at the bottom of the barrel last year, but that really had more to do with the fact that they did not pitch well. They still have a great lineup. I mean, you've got Paul Goldschmidt at first, you've got Nolan Arenado at third. Now, that's just two guys, and they have a lot of complementary players surrounding those guys in that lineup. I mean, they're going to score some runs. If they pitch at all, there's no way they end up in last place. Their bullpen just had a really difficult time last year, and I think if they get some consistency out of their bullpen, they're going to be a team that can wreak some havoc because they can definitely score some runs.
Oh yeah, I agree. And like with the young guys, you have the Nolan Gorman, who's the middle infielder, and then Jordan Walker. Both of them, they're electric. You've seen them change the game with all their big power and stuff. So I think, like you said, the offense, that'll be fun to watch. It's just like if the moves they've made in the offseason, can that bullpen sustain and not be the worst bullpen in the MLB again this year?
Yeah, I think you're right with Jordan Walker. I was impressed with him last year. He seemed to show a great consistency with making solid contact. He is a big kid. He's still young and raw, but he's got great power. But what he has that most young players don't have coming to the big leagues is the ability to make contact even with two strikes. He was an awfully good two-strike hitter, at least from what I saw in the games that the Reds played against the Cardinals, especially that last series to finish out the year. I mean, there's some great young players, not only on the Reds club and the Cardinals club, but also on the Brewers Club, the Pirates, and the Cubs. It should be a fun season in the National
Yeah.
League Central.
Oh yeah.
Keep it with National League Central. How do you think O'Neal Cruz is going to bounce back from that injury from last season?
I think, James, I think it's difficult to play shortstop when you're 6'5". We were talking about De La Cruz being 6'5", but De La Cruz can do so many things that other people can't do. I mean, he's so fast. He's got a phenomenal arm. He's awfully quick. And for me, I think O'Neal Cruz probably ends up in the outfield sooner or later. I think consistency with the glove for both of those guys. I mean, think about it. If you're 5'9" or 5'10", it's a little shorter with the glove to the ground than it is when you're 6'5". I mean, there's a lot of. I mean, obviously you have a little bit more reach and a little more wingspan, but it's still a long way to the ground with the glove. And if you're not quick and able to move that glove from your waist to the ground quick, you're just going to have a tough time at shortstop.
You mentioned consistency, and I loved what we talked about the other night with what you look for in players when they're coming up. Can you just re-talk about what you said the other night about what you look for in a player as they come up through the farms and as a prospect?
Yeah, I think that as you're coming up in the minor leagues, a lot of your evaluation or a lot of people's evaluation of you comes with your skill set, whether you throw the ball 90 plus miles an hour or you throw the ball 100 miles an hour. Maybe you have a slider that guys can't hit. Maybe you hit the ball out of the ballpark with some regularity. There's a reason you're in the minor leagues, and the reason that you are is because you can't do it on call. You can't do it consistently. And I think a lot of that has to do with the repetitions. That's part of what you have in the minor leagues. When think about it this way, when you leave high school, you normally play about 30 or 35 games in high school. That's 1 month in the big leagues. When you get to college, you play somewhere between 65 and 75 games, and that's if you make it all the way to the College World Series. That's 2 months in the big leagues. The major leagues plays not only for the 45 days of spring training where they're playing games every day, but they also play 162 games in 182 days. There's 6 months of everyday action that follows after spring training, and that's before you get to the playoffs. So I think that anybody that's scouting has to look for consistency, and you're asking a player to be somebody that they show up and they're the same guy every day. And I think that's the most difficult part for a young player because there's so many emotional highs and lows in the game. And you try to tell these guys, look, don't get too high, don't get too low, just try to stay consistent because consistency breeds success, and success in the big leagues gets you paid.
Oh yeah. You mentioned spring training. That's coming up in like the next week or so. You're reporting down to Arizona with the Reds, I assume?
Yep, I am leaving here day after tomorrow. I'm leaving Thursday. Our first
Fun.
game is Saturday. We're in Goodyear, Arizona. There's about 15 teams that are in Arizona. I've done spring training in both spots. Spring training in Florida is a lot of travel. I mean, you're going all the way from places like Clearwater down to the south part of Florida to play ball games. And a lot of times that just doesn't happen. It's just too much driving, too much travel. So you end up playing the same teams over and over again. In Arizona, in Phoenix, the furthest drive that you have is maybe an hour, and that's only because of traffic. I mean, we're the furthest team west, and the furthest team east is the Cubs, and you can make it there in about, if there's no traffic, you can make it there in 30 minutes. So you're
Oh
playing
wow.
all of the 15 teams, whether they be American League or National League, and sometimes we'll go through spring training and not even play another club. That's how many teams are out there, and it kind of gives you a broader perspective of clubs. And even if you're a fan and you want to come out and watch spring training, to me that's the best time to watch baseball because you can watch a 105 game on the west side of Phoenix, and you still have time to have dinner and make a 705 game on the east side.
Oh yeah, I love spring training. I went down to Jupiter to watch the Cardinals a few years back. It's so much fun. But is there anything you look forward to each year when you go down to Arizona with the Reds? Like any traditions or anything y'all have?
Um, To be honest with you, I look forward to the Mexican food because when you're in Mississippi, you're eating barbecue or you're eating a meat and two vegetables. I mean, that seems to be the Southern apropos thing for lunch or dinner. But there is no Mexican food like it is in Arizona, and that's just one thing I always look forward to. I love the smell of the bat, the smell of the grass, and the crack of the bat, and all those things that go with people coming to the ballpark. But something I look forward to that I can't get right here in my own hometown is some great Mexican food.
Yum. Well, I'm going to be down there in a few months to watch the Cardinals play the Diamondbacks. So do you have like a favorite restaurant you'd recommend my dad and I go see?
Um, yeah, I'm trying. You know, we were talking about this the other night. I should have come up with this. Macayo's is good. That's a place that we go to get fajitas, and I'm trying to think of the other place. There's another Mexican. It'll come to me in a minute. There's another Mexican
Sounds
spot
good.
that's really down to earth, but Macayo's is good to start with.
Sounds great. Appreciate it.
All right. Well, we know the playoffs are a long way away, but we just saw the Rangers make a push that after being one of the worst teams in baseball, we saw the Diamondbacks make it back after years being in the World Series. How do you think teams like that, along with the Phillies and the Astros, how can they repeat their former success in this upcoming season?
James, I think the biggest issue comes down to pitching. I think the Rangers, teams like the Astros and the Phillies, I mean, you can throw the Diamondbacks in this, not to the same nth degree, but those clubs are going to score runs. They're going to hit, and they've got some veteran players that can pick up the slack. I think the biggest issue for me with any club, and it's not just those clubs, it's with any club in the big leagues, is a healthy starting rotation and a club that can go out and pitch when the games are on the line, that seventh, eighth, and ninth inning, with some consistency without either burning out early in the season or getting to a point where you pitch guys so much that they end up getting hurt. Now, are the Diamondbacks and the Rangers expected to get back? I think some would tell you yes, and there'd be a lot that would tell you no. I think the people that really are around the game a lot are predicting that the Dodgers and the Braves will be playing in the National League Championship. But let me tell you this, James, they all said that last year, and
Oh,
they
yeah.
won. So there you go.
They say it every year for the Dodgers,
Every
and
year.
somehow every year they fail to meet up to their expectations. Speaking of the Astros, I'm a big Astros fan, and they just signed Josh Hader this offseason. Could he be the missing key to their success and winning yet another World Series, or do you think they still won't make it?
I think he's going to help them a lot. I think, and the reason I say that is he brings a tenacity and pretty much that consistency I was talking about earlier. He brings it every day, and he's a tough guy to get anything going against. So if you do have a one-run lead and it's late in the ball game, more times than not, he's making that conversion. Now, when you look at what that club is able to do, I think they've got a lot of good young arms in their system. I think they're going to have enough of that kind of round robin starting rotation to be able to fill the innings that they have to have. And I mean, you take Presley and you put him in the seventh and the eighth, or you put Hader in the seventh and the eighth. I mean, you got two guys at the back end that not only are very good at what they do in pressure spots, but they've done it in World Series. They've done it in the playoffs. I mean, they're consistent factors. There's not too many teams that can say that.
Mhm.
And then also another big pitcher that hasn't been signed. Any news on Blake Snell? I mean, he just won what's that award? The Cy
Yeah.
Young this past season, and no one wants him. What's up with that?
Well, I don't think it's the fact that no one wants him. I think that there are teams that are very hesitant to pay the price that he's asking.
Mhm.
And I think ultimately that's what it comes down to. I think when you look at Blake Snell, I don't know that I don't know that he's the kind of guy that you can expect a Cy Young effort from every time he goes out. You look back at his numbers the first couple of months of last year, they were really bad. And there were a lot of folks saying, oh, man, the Padres, I can't believe they signed this guy. And, you know, he got away from Tampa Bay. He's a guy that's going to pitch 4, maybe 5 innings, and he's going to walk about half as many as he strikes out. So you're either going to get a walk or a strikeout, or somebody's going to hit the ball out of the ballpark. He's kind of the 3 true outcomes when it comes to the pitching scenario. I think he's kind of a guy that walks a tightrope every time he's out there. But so far, he seemed to be able to do awfully well. But I don't know that that's a guy that you have some real good feelings that he's going to be consistent every time he's out there.
And that's what you'd already talked about is consistency. And that's how the good players separate, or the great players separate themselves from the good players. It's just consistency and going out there every time.
He's a great pitcher. He has great stuff. But I don't know that you have a reasonable expectation of excellence every time he takes the ball. I think there are days where he might walk 6 or 7 batters in a game. And I mean, that, number one, it's hard to manage. Number two, it's tough for your people that are at the ballpark. And you have to wonder, let's just say that the Yankees are the team that's in on him. If you're the New York Yankees, do you really think, or you have to have the question mark in the back of your head, can he handle New York because of the way that he walks so many batters? He pitched in a very small market in Tampa Bay and an increasingly small market in San Diego where the media pressure was just kind of non-existent. And then you're going to ask him to step into the Bronx? I think that's probably why they're questioning him.
I had the pleasure of going to one of the Subway Series games this past summer. I made the dumb decision of wearing my Jose Altuve jersey, and those fans are hostile. They will let you have it. Even the security guard let me in. He used a couple colorful words and decided to bang on a trash can when I was walking through the metal detector. They are hostile, but I'll give it to them. It was a great baseball environment.
Yeah, they don't let up.
Absolutely not.
Hey, talking about baseball environments, when I realized that you were on that 1998 Cardinals team, and that was the one where Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa, that was the year of the home run race. What was it like? What was it like just being a part of that, just day in and day out, where all the attention's on McGwire?
I think it was pretty spectacular, Drew. I think when you look at what was going on in a home run race that really was unprecedented, to look at what they were, both he and McGwire and Sosa were able to do, especially as the season went on. I know for myself, big league players go out, and position players, pitchers, you go out, you have batting practice when your team is on the field, and then you go back into your locker room while the other team comes out for batting practice. Nobody really hangs around. Nobody stays out there. You're in the locker room either getting something to eat, seeing the trainer, or working out in the weight room or hitting in the batting cage. The thing that amazed me that year is there were teams, especially as we got closer to the All-Star break and started to finish out the year, there were entire teams, pitching coaches, pitchers, bullpen, position players that would stay in the dugout after they would take batting practice. And the reason they stayed in the dugout is they wanted to watch McGwire hit. Now, when he finished, everybody left. They didn't watch the rest of the team. But once McGwire stepped into the batting cage to hit, everybody was watching it because it was kind of amazing as to how far he would hit the baseball. And I'll tell you this story. I got kind of part of this last time when we were talking. He's taking batting practice at Old Shea Stadium, where the Mets used to play. And there was a stands behind the left field wall, bullpen included, and then into the parking lot. He hit 15 consecutive swings, 15 consecutive pitches, not only out of the ballpark, but out of the stadium. And the more balls that he hit, as he got to about 7 or 8, he's about halfway through this run, and the crowd is standing up going berserk. I mean, they're cheering as crazy. All the Mets are in the dugout looking at each other like, oh my gosh, they're throwing up their hands, they're whipping their hats up in the air. And then he gets to 15 and he finally finished his batting practice. It wasn't as though he didn't hit one out. He just stopped hitting, and everybody was like, oh, stepped out of the box, went right into the dugout, back up into the locker room.
Wow.
It was a pretty amazing year.
That's cool. I bet. I mean, just go ahead, James.
Are you good? Finish what you were talking about.
I was just going to say, I mean, it's probably odd because all the media, I remember my dad talking, he was in Scotland over that summer and he would get like a day's late newspaper and he'd always see because every media was covering who was leading that race. So I bet that was just so different. I mean, it ended up that they were all on steroids, which I mean, kind of discredits it a little bit. But just the fact that was happening, it revolutionized baseball, did it not?
Yeah, it was pretty amazing, especially as we got into that last month. I still remember in St. Louis at the Busch Stadium #2, they had 700 plus media credentials from 26 different countries.
God.
We didn't have enough room in our press box or in the media auxiliary area to house all of these folks during the game because everybody's kind of doing reporting and sending it back. I mean, as you know, there are other countries that operate at different hours than the United States.
Mm-hmm.
So what the Cardinals did is they emptied the grounds crew room, which houses all of the mowers and all of the things that you use to take care of the field. They totally cleared it out. They set up tables in there. They put the grounds crew in the tunnel behind our bullpen in right field. And that grounds crew room became the auxiliary press box area #2. So we had the press box and auxiliary #1 and auxiliary #2 to house 720 something plus media members from all over the world. It was pretty wild.
Holy cow. Holy cow.
There was a lot of different languages being spoken during that ballpark or during that game at the ballpark.
You also had the pleasure of playing a season or two with Barry Bonds. What was Barry like?
Barry was different. Barry was quite confident in himself, and he should be. I mean, he knew how to play, and he was quite the feared hitter. I'll say that. That was in San Francisco, and he was just one of those guys that it didn't matter if you were Greg Maddux or John Smoltz, Tom Glavine, Kurt Schilling, Roger Clemens. Didn't matter. Everybody, when Barry Bonds stepped to the plate, if you were on the mound, you made sure you straightened your hat and took notice, and you better follow your P's and Q's and keep the ball out of the middle of the plate, or he would embarrass you.
Did you ever have to pitch against Barry?
Oh, yeah. I pitched against Barry many times in my career. As a matter of fact, I have a baseball card that says loves to face, and then in bold print, it's Barry Bonds. And then it had his numbers against me, which were not very good. One of those things. Some guys you get out, some guys you don't.
Oh, yeah. James, you got anything else?
I think we're about done. Any last words you have to upcoming players that want to make it to the league or play college ball?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that you can do is practice your craft. I think you have to have some consistency. You have to have a tremendous amount of repetition. And I think probably the biggest thing is everybody's good at something. And otherwise you wouldn't be playing the game. And whatever you're good at, you need to practice it over and over and over until you're great at it, until you can do it in your sleep. And that kind of resonates whether you're a baseball player or a businessman or a doctor or lawyer or Indian chief. It really doesn't matter. If you want to be something in life that is really meaningful, be great at what you're good at.
I love that. Be great at what you're good at. That's one to remember. I think that's a great way to end it. So thanks for joining us, Mr. Brantley. I've loved this. This has been great.
Oh, thank you so much.
I've enjoyed it.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's all for this week.
Yep.
Uh,
We'll have our normal episode coming out Saturday morning as usual. Thank you all for watching, and see you then.
Thank you.